What's your take? Of course, Zuckerberg saying that phones should be designed around people, not apps, but really what he's saying is that phones should be designed around Facebook.
Yeah, designed around our app. Thank you very much. I don't think anybody should be surprised by this announcement by Facebook. I mean, the problem that they were always going to have if they unveiled, say, an HTC phone with an option of having a Facebook home screen was that the success of that would be determined by how many phones were sold. And you heard Mark Zuckerberg reference that. I mean, if you're in the phone business, your success is based on how many phones you're able to sell. And so he had said in the past they didn't want to make a phone, and he reiterated today that they don't want to make a phone. But what they do want to do is, given that everybody is using Facebook on their phones now, they want to be able to build their business in the best way they can. So they spent the last year and a half making sure the mobile apps were as good as they can. And now they say, look, we can take advantage, as he said, with the open source nature of Android to fine-tune this in a way that if you're an Android phone user and you want to have Facebook in a bigger way in your presence when you turn on your phone, you're going to be able to do that. If you're turned off by this because it means your apps that you're used to using are that much further away from you, don't worry, you just swipe once and all your other apps are there. I think we should also point out, Emily, and then I'll let others react, is that this is the exact kind of thing that Apple has zero interest in doing. Apple knows very well how much time people are spending on their phones, and Apple wants to be able to control that experience that you have on your iPhone through their home screen and how they set that up. But Facebook has watched that. They're very aware of the benefit that you have when you're in that pole position, and so they're making this an option.
And Zuckerberg did, in fact, give a shout out to Google, which was interesting, saying it's because of Google's commitment to being an open operating system that Facebook can do this. Paul, I want to get your thoughts. How exactly does this work?
Well, we're not going to know until we can use it, I guess. But I mean, my sense is it's going to feel a lot like a cross between Google Now and Path, which probably makes it indifferent news for Google Now and not particularly good news for Path, meaning that it's this kind of immersive, picture-driven view of your life with constant updates and this kind of sense of here's what's happening now in my life. And that'll be the way that it kind of feels when you're sitting at the, at the console. I will say, however, that, while Zuck was pretty clear that, or tried to be clear, I think that, they didn't have to do anything to Android. I don't know if you noticed, but he did insert a kind of a weasel word at the end where he said, we didn't have to fork Android, meaning, really go in and change take the source code in a different direction. But he kind of said something like much or hardly any or something like that. But I think you're going to find out at some point during this presentation that they are doing some customizations, probably related to HTC, that make it work even better on some platforms. While it will be widely available, I'm betting that you're going to see that they actually did do a little bit of, piping changes.
And on this idea of forking, Paul, we've discussed the fact that Amazon has, quote unquote, forked Android with the Kindle Fire, that Samsung has essentially forked Android with, the special Samsung version of Android. What is it, despite the shout out to Google, what does this really mean for Google in the big picture that Facebook, its biggest competitor, is capitalizing on something that Google is putting out there for free?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it, right? I mean, essentially, they're providing them an operating system that they can then enhance and then hide most of the things that Google's actually doing. So I think, this is a free rider problem in economics terms. It's great for Facebook, probably pretty good in the long run for Google, just meaning they get more Android units out there. But increasingly, Android becomes invisible as it becomes buried behind this Facebook Home, app, UI, interface, shell, whatever you want to call it. And so I think that's the real message here. And I think that's the way the stock market is responding the way it is today, with, Facebook up a little bit and Google down, that, this is probably better news for Facebook than it is for Google, shout outs aside.
All right, Corey, I asked Paul earlier how exactly this is going to work. We don't know a lot yet, but is this something that's already baked into a phone that you buy? Is this something that you can download if you have an Android phone?
In order for this to get big, they're going to have to make it a downloadable product. And I think that there was a lot of sort of things not said that I was looking. I was a little bit of Kremlin watching. I was looking to see which apps he mentioned. There was no mention of Twitter. Twitter was not in any of the screens that he showed. I would imagine the Twitter mobile usage is really big. But I think Facebook knows that its future is in mobile, and we've talked about this a lot over the last year. But unique from Facebook, they've actually given us numbers about how many people only use Facebook on phones. So Zuck's a graph showing that nearly 25% of the phone usage, didn't sort of quantify who that was or where those people were. But we know the numbers of Facebook's mobile-only users are growing at a really amazing pace.
Right, 680 million monthly active mobile
Those are mobile users, but mobile only is also really interesting. There are 157 mobile only users, people who never get to a desktop to use Facebook. Those numbers are growing really dramatically for Facebook, and this is a way to make sure that Facebook is center to the mobile user experience and remains the first thing that people think about on their phone. I think they've recognized with the growth of things like Instagram how quickly people can go away from using Facebook on the phone and use other stuff more.
So Simon Zuckerberg showed a limited number of photos of this new product. From what you've seen, does this really improve Facebook's ability to attract mobile ad dollars?
Well, I think the really addicted people to Facebook are probably going to install this app if that's how it works and use Facebook even more. So people spending more time there allows over time Facebook to insert ads somewhere in that stream. So I think for people who really love Facebook, it will probably increase usage, which is a good thing.
Paul, who's going to download this? Who's going to want this?
I think they're the core audience that they want to get to. These people who really, in a sense, as Corey says, it's that Facebook for them is a mobile application and the desktop, really doesn't exist. It's just an afterthought. It's for, sad people at Starbucks and students bored in classes. Everybody else is accessing Facebook.
People who understand the phrase Kremlin watching, Paul? People remember Kremlin watching?
Right.
Actually, the Kremlin? Yes, I'm dating myself, yes.
Exactly. Right. And so I think that's going to be the core audience. I think the real question will be, we've played this game before, almost 10 years ago, maybe longer than that, back when Symantec launched their Norton desktop and tried to take over the desktop of Windows operating systems. And that played really well for about 2-3 years until Microsoft changed the desktop and the operating system and blew them out. And so this is the same risky game that Facebook is playing here. While they're riding on top of Android, at the end of the day, it's no different than riding on Windows, and you get blown out when you create these shells if the operating system changes dramatically. And so it's an interesting and very tricky game to play, as Symantec demonstrated almost 15 years ago.
Well, and my question is, why would you want this as opposed to the generic Facebook app?
Well, I think you want it because it is, from your standpoint, it's all you do. So if it's all you do, if you're really, as I said at the outset, if your phone is essentially a social appliance that now and then you get, annoying phone calls from parents and/or employers, then you want to live inside of an environment that reflects that. And this app really creates a new mini operating system or a shell on top of the phone in which you can live that life. And so for those people for whom that's really all they do with this appliance, that's probably the right place for them to be. Clicking on other things and opening other apps is really kind of vestigial behavior for them.
Corey, what does it mean for Apple?
Well, it's interesting for Apple. I mean, they're stepping into this place about user interfaces, which is a really tricky place to do. I mean, no one spent more time on this probably than Apple, and so I wonder what the Apple reaction will be, if any. But I think that, Facebook's already taken a big nod to Apple and developing only for Apple iOS and their Facebook app. I think this is just a nod back to Android after they've kind of dissed HTML5.